Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I have a little bit of a book haul for you all. I think the last one that I did was like in September 2021. It's now almost going to be April 2022, so it's been quite a while. That being said, I don't have like a ton of stuff to show you. I haven't been like taking in a lot of books, mostly because I've been borrowing from my library a lot, and I do that just like consistently, but also Kindle Unlimited, also where I read a lot of books. That being said, in order to kind of like fill the space, I do have some arcs that I could talk about, since those are technically like things that I received. We'll make it count. But we'll start with arcs just to kind of get them out of the way. The first arc I'll talk about is The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. This is already out. I believe it was released February 2022. Adult fantasy. In this book we follow a character who is essentially like the justice system of this kingdom. He can play like detective, judge, jury, executioner throughout the entirety of the realm. He has that power given to him by like the emperor, I think is the title, or the king. He only answers to him. He doesn't really answer to anyone else. He's supposed to be this like badass character. The whole story is actually told from the perspective of his like assistant protege character. The story is told like looking back. I believe this character is like in her old age, and she's retelling the story from the beginning, I think when she's like 19 years old. So yeah, if you kind of like that storytelling, and if you like this kind of character, give it a shot. I personally did not like this book. I gave it like a 2.5. That being said, I am in the minority. A lot of people seem to really enjoy it. I just thought the characters were insufferable. But it is like political intrigue. The plot kind of unfolds as it goes on. There is like a court scene. I believe the author, I think I read that he's like a lawyer, or he's practiced law before, so I guess that's where he drew inspiration. I liked those aspects, but some of the character and plot just I didn't like. The second book, which I'm still in the middle of but it has been released, is The City of Dusk by Tara Sim. This is an adult fantasy book where the story takes place in a world that used to have interconnected like realms, like through I guess magic you could travel through realms. However, like 500 years prior, the gods kind of took away that ability, so now the realms are kind of like isolated, and the story specifically takes place in one realm that's kind of slowly dying because it's lost connection to other places. And we follow characters who are basically the descendants of these gods that took away this ability. They're a part of like the noble houses. There's like 4 I think, and we follow like 5 or 6 maybe, and since they're related or distantly related to gods, they do have some magical abilities. It's really cool. A big critique I see is that this has very like juvenile writing. I would just say it's like YA writing with an adult plot. So if you are a YA reader and you want to try something more adult, I think this might be a good transition as far as the writing goes. Again, I haven't finished the book. Right now I'd say it's like a steady 3 stars. I'm only like 20% of the way through, so I can't really speak to like how well it ends and all that kind of stuff, but I am like intrigued so far, and I'm going to continue on. There does seem to be a lot of like queer rep. My favorite character so far is a necromancer, and I believe she's like Indian coded, so that's really cool as well. So it's coming along. The next arc that I have is Siren Queen by Nghi. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It comes out in May 2022. This takes place in pre-code Hollywood, which if you're unfamiliar with Hollywood, there used to be something called the Hays Code, where basically a bunch of people in Hollywood got together and decided what is and isn't appropriate in films, and they straight up just like banned content like interracial couples, queer characters or queer people in film. This was I think put in the 1930s, so I'm assuming it takes place before that. And we follow a Chinese American woman who wants to be like, she wants to make it in Hollywood, but they are like actual like monsters in Hollywood, something along those lines. Don't know much more than that. Would imagine that this might touch on certain things that were brought up in Hollywood recently, as within like the last 5-10 years. The next book I'm very excited for. I have an arc for Fevered Star by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the sequel to Black Sun, which I absolutely loved. This takes place in a world that is inspired by pre-Columbian Mesoamerican cultures, specifically like Maya is like the most obvious one to me, but you can probably, if you're familiar, pick up on other stuff. This is a pretty epic story. We follow 3 characters. My favorite character that I think other people didn't like as much, but I loved her, is the Sun Priestess. Her name is Narampo, I believe, and she has managed to like come out of like poverty and into like pretty much the highest position that you can attain in this like religious system that they have. She like reads the stars, she's a sun priest, and there's a lot of political scheming with her storyline, which is probably why I really liked it. I believe she also might have a love story brewing between her and this non-binary character. I'm liking their dynamic. And then we also follow two other characters where their story kind of intertwines. We also follow a character named Shiala, and she's a captain of a vessel. She also kind of has like Siren mermaid traits, and she's basically asked, or she takes this job to transport cargo from point A to point B. And this cargo is actually our third character named Serapio, and he's essentially a chosen one. I don't want to spoil this too much, but it's basically like the first chapter and the summary of the first book. But Serapio is like the chosen one, but whereas chosen ones typically save the world, this character is supposed to do the opposite. And the first chapter of the first book, Black Sun, is like super like wow, and I'm really excited to like get back into the series. I really love the first book, and this one comes out in April, so it's coming up soon, so I should probably read this sooner rather than later. So I have two more arcs to talk about, but this next one I did not ask for. I don't know how the publisher got it to my email and sent it to like my NetGalley account. I have Upgrade by Blake Crouch. He's a fairly popular sci-fi author. He wrote Dark Matter and Recursion, I believe. I actually really didn't like Dark Matter. So, yeah. I don't know much about this because I didn't request it. I believe we follow a character named Logan, and he, I guess, wakes up one day better than he was before, like stronger, faster, and he finds out that his genome was hacked for some nefarious purpose. There's like hacking genomes for what reason, I don't know. I'm sure the story will unveil this giant insane plot. I might read it if I feel like it, but it was also like unsolicited, so yeah. And this last arc, I immediately like went to NetGalley to request as soon as I saw, I think, the author talking about it on Twitter, and that is the Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdulla. This is inspired by 1001 Nights, and the plot also hints at like a magic lamp thing, so we can see the inspiration. I'm really excited just because I tend to just really enjoy non-European inspired fantasy stuff. Like I don't want to say lenient, but I just like tend to just enjoy myself more. But in this book, we follow a character who I think is like some sort of thief, and she has like a djinn bodyguard that she works with. And then one night she saves the sultan or the king's son, and he forces her to basically find this magic lamp and like restore life to the land. I guess the land is dying somehow, but in doing so, she would like destroy like all djinn. I think there's also some like djinn queen, like evil djinn queen or something. So it sounds really cool. Sounds fun. I think it's gonna be a series. I'm really excited. So those are all the arcs I have. Let me actually start on the physical books. I think I'll start on books that I've already read. So we'll start with A Winter's Promise by Christelle Dabos. I got this for Christmas. I've already read it. Absolutely loved it. This is the first book in a 4-book series. It's technically YA, but the writing is very whimsy, and I think would be very readable for adult, primarily readers. In this book, we follow a character named Ophelia, and this book takes place in a world where Earth has kind of broken up into different pieces. They're called arcs, I believe, and each arc has a kind of quirk to it. For example, the arc that our main character's from is called Animo, and everyone on this arc can like read the history of objects. To the skill, it varies, but Ophelia's very good at it apparently, and she also has this ability to like travel through mirrors. And she's a pretty solitary figure. I think she works at a museum and she enjoys her work there. She's not a very like outgoing type person. And then her family basically tells her that she is to marry a man, he's about her age, from a different arc. She doesn't know the purpose of this marriage. She just assumed that she'd marry someone within her world, so this kind of takes her by surprise. She's essentially like a fish out of water the entire book because each arc seems to have like a different kind of culture to it. Ophelia's arc everyone kind of refers to each other as like the family, so it seems like a more communal, community based world. But the place that she's gonna go to and, you know, meet her fiance, he's from a place called the Pole, which has a very like wintry setting, like frozen to death type setting. That culture is very like clan versus clan versus clan scheming, that kind of thing, and she's not good at that. She feels very uncomfortable, understandably. I really like how the author didn't really like suddenly turn her character into like a scheming badass. Like, she's pretty much floundering her way through. It is a very slow book, but I really loved it. And if there's going to be romance, it's probably going to be one of the like slowest burn romances, because in this first book, her and her fiance probably talk for the first time like 50% of the way through the book. It's slow, but I really like slow. So I also have a book from a new auto-buy author, and that is The Cheerleaders by Kara Thomas. I read this month, absolutely loved it. This is a YA mystery thriller. This book takes place 5 years after the death of 5 cheerleaders that all died within a single month, different ways. I think there's a car accident, murder, and suicide. It was very tragic, but everyone kind of just assumed it's one big coincidence, and everyone kind of moved on. We follow the sister of one of these cheerleaders 5 years after the fact, and she's coming across certain information that was left like unstudied, pretty much. I really like Kara Thomas's story and writing, so that is why I picked up The Darkest Corners by Kara Thomas. I haven't read this one. I literally went to the bookstore specifically looking for this book. I believe she only has one other book out under this name. I don't know much about this one. I don't really want to know too much. I believe this follows 2 girls who used to be friends growing up. They witnessed something tragic and they kind of just moved on and never talked about it. Kara Thomas is now going to be one of my auto-buy authors. I absolutely love her story, her writing. I think what she's trying to do is just basically have stories where teen girls are not the nicest people, but understandably, given what teen girls go through and what women in general go through, if society expected women to be more violent, I think that's what our author's trying to explore here. So yeah, I have these 2 books. One I really enjoyed. Looking forward to this one. I actually read this next book quite a while ago, and that is The Grey Wolf Throne by Cinda Williams Chima. This is the 3rd book in the 7 Realms series. I love the series. I've already read it, finished it last year, but I didn't have book 3 or 4. I have the first 2, so I got a copy of the 3rd just to have on my shelves. I absolutely love the series. Political intrigue. It definitely is YA and it reads that way, but I think if you're an adult fantasy reader and you don't mind YA, like lighter writing style, this story does have a lot of layers. It's not like a one-to-one plot. So we're now moving on to books that I have not read, so you might hear a lot of like, that's all I pretty much know going forward. I have Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I don't know what to say about this because this book was like coveted. The arc, like people were going crazy to get this arc, but I found this at a Half Price Books and I picked it up traveling through San Antonio with a friend. I believe this takes place at Yale. We follow a character who's like investigating like secret societies, pretty dark content in this book. I don't know if it's supposed to be like urban paranormal fantasy or leaning more into horror. I'm not super sure. Haven't read it, but I do really like her Grishaverse, and I know this is not connected at all. I think she does write characters that people get really attached to, even if the plot might not be your thing. I have heard people say, while the story wasn't my favorite, I want to know what happens to the characters, so I think that's what Leigh Bardugo does best, so I'm really interested in seeing that here. So this book I have heard no one talk about. I kind of just picked it up off the shelf because the spine looked cool. But I have Duskfall by Christofer Husberg. Again, never heard anyone talk about it. I'll just read the summary because this can explain it better than I can. Pulled from a frozen sea, pierced by arrows, and close to death, Knot has no memory of who he was. But his dreams are dark, filled with violence and unknown faces. Winter, a Thailand woman whose people have been oppressed by humans, is married to and abandoned by Knot on the same day. In her search for him, she will discover her control of magic, but risk losing herself utterly. And since Nia, priestess and true believer, returns home to discover her family at the heart of a heretical rebellion, a rebellion that only the Inquisition can crush. Their fates and those of others will intertwine in a land where magic and demons are believed dead, but dark forces still vie for power. I don't know, a lot of that sounds really cool. I'm really interested in these 2 women's storyline. I'm not sure about Knot, but I think these 2 girls, I'm gonna love their storylines. It sounds like Winter has like a bad bitch arc coming up for her. Love that. Let me know if you read this or heard about it before, because I haven't. So this next book I kind of hesitated picking up because I haven't heard the best things about it, but I also don't like listen to other people too much before I make my own opinions. But I decided to like bite the bullet and pick up Seafire by Natalie C. Parker. This is a YA, like nautical fantasy seafaring type book. I love fantasy set at sea. It's not something that I get to read too much of. A lot of fantasy is like big sprawling empires and that kind of stuff. I want something set at sea. I don't know much about the book, but I do think that we follow a captain of a ship that is predominantly or entirely like female, like a female only ship. So that's interesting. Don't know the story, the plot, anything other than that, but I am biased towards the things that I already like in books, so at least I'll hope I enjoy this. So yeah, so I only have like 2 more books to talk about. I have Waistcoats and Weaponry by Gail Carriger. This is the 3rd book in the Finishing School series, which I did put a pause on. I'm not gonna dive into it right now. I did read the 1st book and I thought it was okay, but Gail Carriger has an adult series that is connected to this YA series that I think I should finish before I touch on this one. I think the author assumed that we'd finish her adult series and then jump into this YA. I thought you could probably read it independently, but I think it's best if you have that adult series in your head before you get to this one. But in this book we follow our main character Sophronia, who gets invited to go to a finishing school where she can learn to be a proper lady, as well as learn espionage for, I'm assuming, the country. I'm not totally sure. I thought the writing in the 1st book was very like nonchalant, like the character's going through all this kind of like action and she's kind of like whatever about it, but maybe that's just the author's writing style and I have to get used to it. I don't know. Again, I'm putting the series on pause, and then when I finish her other books I'll eventually get to this. This next book I picked up because I wanted to see what it was all about. I know the author's very controversial, but he's also dead, so I have like no qualms. That sounds really shitty, but he has passed, so I have like no qualms about like reading his stuff. Also, used bookstore buyer. Again, I don't really know much about like the actual content of the book. I just wanted to give it a shot, so I picked up Wizard's First Rule by Terry Goodkind. This is the 1st book in the Sword of Truth series. I believe that's what it's called. It looks like there's a lot of plot in here, but I have seen videos of people completely trashing Terry Goodkind's like work, but I've also seen people say that despite the quality of his work, it's still really fun to read, which I love. Just having fun, like that's why I read, to like have fun. So like I'm not looking for man booker every single time I read a book. I want to have a good time, and I hope I have a good time with this. If I don't, then you know I can always return it. But my used bookstore has a lot of his books, especially these like nice floppy editions. So I'm pretty sure those are all the books that I have to share. If I've forgotten a book, then I've forgotten a book. It's been so long since I, you know, last did this. Please let me know if you are interested in reading any of these, if you've read any of these, if I've introduced you to any new books. I'd like to hear anything you'd have to say in the comments down below. I'll also link my socials down below, as well as some far more important links. Feel free to like, dislike, comment, or subscribe, or do neither. It's all cool with me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.